everybody. Welcome into the special edition podcast that I'm putting out. And it's going to be, of course, around the holidays that we start to think about things like mental health and what that looks like. And some people are feeling a little down, and some people are feeling like they're watching others be down and don't know where their happiness kind of fits into there. And so I felt like this might be um, a good session to put out there just to talk a little bit about some of those feelings that come up. And like I do in a lot of my work, I use myself as an example because I'm the only one who knows myself. I can't know how other people feel. I don't like grouping people together in ways that I'm not positive people should be grouped together. And so it's going to be a lot about talking about my own depression, hoping that potentially you can take some strategies, some coping strategies out of there and have them work for you. Now, of course, the disclaimer is that I'm not a mental health professional. I'm a mental health advocate. So that means that I speak from a place of personal experience only, not clinical experience. Some people find that that's helpful because I can, I use story to help me with that, use narrative. But I don't actually know the clinical side of mental health. So I am putting that disclaimer out there so that you remember. And so I want to just start out explaining where this is coming from a little bit. So in the last 6 months, I've been dealing with a lot of mental health issues. And in particular, my depression has been really, really bad. And that's interesting to me because I actually thought that through my healing processes, I had come to a place where I wouldn't get into a bad depressive bout anymore. I honestly felt like I had healed from that I had done a good job with my healing to get past that. And so the danger always in believing that you've healed is that you stop watching for the red flags or the landmarks that's telling you that something is coming back. And so it really did come on as a surprise to me. And so I want to use some of this information just to help guide when I talk about some of the strategies and coping mechanisms. I'm going to weave in there, how they related back to what was happening to me over the 6 months. That's why I'll be using it. I'm not going to get into details because I tend to find that when you start to talk about mental health and depression and things like that, people start to get a little, I want to say competitive is the right word, but they start to, some people kind of try to like one up you, and some people will think, oh my gosh, my situation's not that bad, so I shouldn't feel as bad as I do. And no, we're going into this. I'm not going to allow for that competitive feeling or that feeling of guilt. Like, we're going to let that go. And so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail with some of the things that have happened. But I do want to give just some things again, so we can talk about how they lead into the strategies. So one of the ways that I try to look at my mental health issues is really as objective as possible, and from the stance of, if I can both lean into that emotion and work through the experience of having those feelings, but I can look at it objectively, I'm better able to find the things that I might be triggering for me, or notice the things that are helping or not helping, and then move forward from there, make decisions from there. I also do a lot of processing, a lot of processing. And I know, like, some of my, my main core people are here tonight, and they will tell you that they get the messages and they are really long, because I'm kind of a partner processor. I have to process out loud. I need to, hear people's reactions to my processing. I need people to give me feedback, whether that's verbal or nonverbal. And so, when I am in a state like that, I can be very vocal because I need that processing partner. Um, and so that is all part of really knowing myself truly. And if there's anything that you do for yourself in the process of healing, it is that when you are feeling good, getting to really know yourself. And I think that that's so much easier said than done, because just societal pressures and the pressures of our job, the pressures of our family, where we fit within that family, different roles and hats that we play can really dictate the lens in which we look at ourselves. And sometimes you have to try to figure out what is that lens that's given to us and where we actually are in the processing of our human and how we feel. And so, getting to know yourself really is one of the I would say that the best strategy, uh, bar none, because it's going to lead every other strategy or coping mechanism that you use from then on. And so, some of the things that I've learned about myself really come from stepping back and letting go of some of those expectations, so that I can see where I land and see where I fall and what feels good and what doesn't, in comparison to what's expected or not expected. So again, like knowing to be objective while leaning into the emotion, knowing that I need to process, I need to process with somebody else. Those are all things that I've learned over time that help me through these times that my mental health issues are piling on. And so that would really be like my number one suggestion. So about 6 months ago, I started having some things that happened in rapid succession. And some of them had to do with changes that were very unexpected, changes in some things with work and that was going on in my career. Had to do with some things just not going as planned, and like in like, not just, well, it didn't happen, but like tanking, like those types of things. Had some of those. I had some I've been having some kind of major issues with my health for about the last year, and like things started piling on, and to the point that I'm like, well, which do I deal with first? And so like that was a really difficult thing for me. And I think that I could say, well, all of those things were what contributed to my depression, and they were, but it was sort of by proxy. Like what that was really all about was a lack of control. And that tends to be a big trigger of mine, a lack of control. I didn't have any control over the unexpected changes, and I'm not good with change anyway. I didn't have any control over the things that were not going as planned, and I didn't have any control over my health. Some of the things that were happening were completely out of my control. And so where does the control thing come from? And again, this all goes back to knowing yourself well, right? Um, the the control thing comes really from my childhood. Because I grew up in the home that I grew up in, I struggled with not being able to control my environment, but needing to control myself in a way that I was safe. But then also, sometimes lack of control in my environment, controlling myself still didn't allow me to be safe. And so in some ways, I'm always grasping at control. And I wouldn't say that I'm a control freak. My friends might say I'm a control freak, but it's really the lack of control that's triggering for me when I don't feel like I have a voice, or I don't feel like I have a say, or I don't have influence in a situation that's happening. And so that lack of control is important, because I'm going to come back to that in a little bit. And I actually took notes for a podcast. I never do this, but I took notes because I wanted to make sure you got all the goods. Okay. So I'm going to come back to the control thing in a second. But another piece that, as far as knowing myself goes, that's important, is that my depression in particular has several aspects to it that come together, that I need to strategize for. So if I'm really looking at this objectively, if I'm going to try to heal and work through my depression or work through these bouts, and obviously right now I'm on the upswing, because otherwise I would not be able to do this. But if I look at it objectively, there are pieces of my depression that are important. So some of these things are, like, I have like a reduced executive functioning when I am severely depressed. So where you hear these quotes like, you can't control other people, but you can control how you react to them, or you can't control this. You might not control situations, but you can control how you feel. Yeah, that's out the window in a lot of cases. I don't feel like I have control over my emotions, or sometimes what I think or how I react. And so that plays a part also in that lack of control, right? All of a sudden, I'm frustrated and I'm crying and I can't stop and I can't control what's making me frustrated. And so that all sort of feeds into that same thing. And so that that adds another layer onto that lack of control. I also have, it also increases my anxiety. That makes sense, right? For a lot of people, a lot of times depression and anxiety go together. It increases my anxiety. It also increases my social anxiety. Social anxiety is something that has gotten worse for me over the course of time. And I actually feel like my job and my work has contributed to that. And something else that has contributed to that is, I have something called rejection sensitive dysmorphia, and that is something to do with ADHD. And what that is that I am very sensitive to even the perception of rejection or any kind of like critique or anything like that. I'm very sensitive to that. And so what that can look like is that my emotions that come along with that can be physically painful. Like, I can actually feel it in my body. And so that, you know, it just makes me more sensitive to people all around. It gets worse also with social media, that, and being in big crowds, presenting to people, giving podcasts, like all of those things. Anytime that I'm in social situations, that has the ability to rear its ugly head. And because my executive functioning is reduced, that feels bigger. And so that's all a part of my depression as well. Something else that is important about my depression, and this often makes people nervous, is I have something called passive suicidal ideation. I've had this my whole life. I actually can't remember a time that I haven't had it. And what that means is that I don't have an active suicide plan, but I regularly think about not being here. It's gotten better in the last few years. I would say since maybe 2019, it's gotten a lot less. But for many, many years, it would be, doing things like walking into a hotel room and looking out the window to see how far down it was. And so kind of that, like, people might daydream. It was kind of that feeling of daydreaming about it. And so that obviously, like as my depression would get worse, that might also start to fit into some of that. So those are important because as I start to talk about strategies, my strategies have to address some of these pieces of my depression, right? Okay, so if you have any questions, you're welcome to ask them. I may or may not answer them, to be honest, because if it's anything clinical, I'm not even going to try. But you are welcome to ask questions. So some of the things that I do to try to get through some of those really, really difficult times, and I've heard other people say this, depression is so weird. It really is. It's so odd because it throws you off from what feels like your whole being of who you are. And and I think that that's one of the hardest parts of it, actually, is that if there's any time that you've learned to really love yourself and be appreciative of who you are, depression takes that away from you. And that part is really hard. So, some of the things that I do during those really difficult times is I first take 1 minute at a time. And that literally looks like um, me saying something like, I can get through this 1 minute and I'll watch the clock and I'll be doing something, probably for work, because isn't that what we do? And then I'll get through 2 minutes and then 5 minutes. And I'll keep going by those minutes to get through those things. And that's one thing that I've heard from people over and over again that really works well from them is to break time up into smaller chunks. It feels really big to have to get through tomorrow. Like it feels really big to have to get to that next day and try to do all the things that we know are going on, especially during the holidays. Oh my gosh, right? Like we have to buy presents and we have to talk to people. If you're not in the capacity to do that, that's really difficult. And so, you know, a friend of mine laughs at me because I will regularly say, out loud, okay, I can do this. I got this. Here we go. But it really is sometimes how you need to convince yourself, like be your own best cheerleader to get through those times where it just feels like it's heavy and it's all consuming and you don't know really how you're going to get through those pieces. So breaking time up into chunks is a really it's a tangible way to get through some of those days. Okay. Oh my goodness gracious. All right, we're on to the next page, friends. Okay. So time into chunks. And the other thing that breaking time into chunks can do is really helps you with that feeling. And this is also a common description by people with depression, whether it's something that is ongoing or something that just feels like it's just happening right now, is that a common description is that you feel like you're kind of standing and you're moving slowly and the world is moving quickly around you. And it's I had an actual uh, moment where I was like, every ball in the air is falling. Like every single one is falling. Like, how is this even possible? And it felt like everything, like I was in the middle of a tornado. And so that, like, taking that time and slowing it down and putting it into chunks can also help with that, uh, that illusion that the world is just moving too fast. Um, so that is something that I can control. I can control how I perceive my time and what I'm doing in those moments. because control is triggering for me, and I think it is for a lot of people. Like if you really, really dig down to what's happening around you, and you look at what it is, you look at the situations and you're like, what is it that's really upsetting me? Control is something for a lot of people. Like they have a really tough time with that. And so the first thing I do is look for things I can control. One thing that I can control is I check the physical. Okay. So, for example, I check, am I drinking enough water? There are, and I've said this in so many podcasts, but there are studies out there that show that there is a link to depression and dehydration. These are very tangible ways you can try digging yourself out and fighting back, right? And so, am I drinking enough water? My answer to that is always no. I do not like water. I will always be a negative on that one. And so I need to start drinking more water and making sure I'm hydrated. Vitamins. I've also said this many, many times. I am consistently low on vitamin D. A lot of people in the Midwest are, just with the lack of sun and the lack of warmth and all of those things. And so I will start taking vitamin D. Because I have a difficult time establishing patterns and habits, I, because of my ADHD, sometimes I will do something for 3 months and then one day I will literally forget that I ever did it before. And so I'll start taking vitamin D on a regular basis, and then I'll just one day stop because I'll forget. And when I start taking it again, I always notice a difference. I'm also always anemic. And that also can play a part in how you feel as well. And so, and anemia is iron. I always recommend taking drops or getting the vitamins that way because it gets into your system better. There's also I take one of the vitamins I take is a drop of vitamin D, and I think I'd have to look. So if you're interested, message me because I'll look for you when I get home. But I think it's vitamin D and vitamin K. I think K helps you like absorb the vitamin D. And so if that is an issue for you, let me know and I can look those up. But I always recommend you can just get them on Amazon. Yeah, magnesium is really great as well. Tisha says magnesium. Magnesium can help you absorb certain things. Like for example, if you are ADHD, they tell you to take magnesium. It helps absorb the medication for that. And it also, if you tend to eat a lot of sugar, that's also on my list, check your sugar intake. There we go. K2 helps with absorption. Yeah, so that's in vitamin K is with that vitamin D that I take. But magnesium, if you find that you crave sugar, it might actually be magnesium that you're low in. So magnesium can help with that. The one thing about magnesium is you need to be a little bit careful because it can impact your heart and how it works. And so just be aware of that. But magnesium is a really great one as well. Magnesium is known to help people sleep. It does not help me. But I do, like Tisha said, it helps her. Like there are other people I've spoken to that say that magnesium does really help them. So that's a great one as well. So again, to look at your sugar intake. My sugar intake tends to be high, especially around the holidays. And so we know that can also impact your mood and those types of things. Another thing I look at is sleep. Sleep is so incredibly important. And one of my issues with this depressive episode that definitely impacted me is that one of my health issues was that I had been thrown from my horse, and they originally told me that I had a broken vertebrae in my back. Now they're not really sure what it is, but I was waking up every night for hours on end in a lot of pain. And so that was taking away from my sleep. So it was that was difficult because it was out of my control. But on a normal basis, if this were happening to me, stress usually also makes me not sleep. And so looking for ways to try to help with my sleep and to figure out, to stay asleep longer is one of the things that can help. I do have the luxury of, turning my alarm off sometimes if I need to. And so just giving myself grace in order to do that is important as well. And then finally, moving versus sitting. How much time I spend moving versus how much time I spend sitting. This has a little bit to do also with when I am sitting. I tend to be looking at a computer, which is also not good for my mental health. So getting up and moving and doing those things. One thing that I found during this bout of depression that I love is something called somatic exercises. And you can Google them. You can find some on YouTube. I use the app Better Me, but it does cost money. So I don't usually like to recommend things that cost money. But somatic exercises I found them to be a combination of like meditation, breath work, yoga, and not like hard yoga, but the fun yoga, like child's pose and downward dog and stuff like that. It's kind of a combination of those things. And so if you are feeling like, you need to just reset, I have found somatic exercises to be amazing for that. And so I highly recommend that. It gets me up, it gets me moving. The ones I do usually take about 11 to 12 minutes, so it's not very long. I can do them several times a day. And oftentimes they include stretching, which is also a really important thing for your body that feels good. So I highly recommend those things. So check for the physical. And that would be, again, something I can control. It's very tangible. I can check it off a list. Am I drinking enough water? Am I, getting enough sleep? Am I taking my vitamins? I can literally have this in a list and I can check it off. So very controllable. And also it helps you to know what is working for you and what's not. Like if you do something for a few days and it's not working, then you try another strategy. So my next piece is self-care. These two probably seem pretty obvious, and they're the two that I always talk about. The issue with my depressive episode this time is that one of the things that happened to me actually happened with my self-care. So I had decided last year it wasn't really on a whim, but it was sort of on a whim, that I was going to buy a horse and I was going to start horseback riding for my self-care. My horse came and he was, I want to say unrideable would be the loosest term, the nicest term to use. And as I worked with him and started to get him better, we found that he came down with it's called EPM. So it's basically like if you imagine MS in a horse. And he came down with that, and it's been thousands of dollars to treat him. And so he may or may not get better. We're not sure. But my source of self-care that I had been using basically became a source of stress, which doesn't help in the realm of mental health, and was just sort of one more thing that landed on the list. So, I've been having to do other things for self-care besides the thing that I really wanted to do. And so I've been using those somatic exercises and making sure that I'm walking more, and I go out and I walk him, and I try to find other ways to interact with him besides riding to get that, get that energy release. And so, like this has been one of those episodes where I've had to work around some of my normal strategies and maybe have the strategy, but figure out a different way to use it. So that's really important as well. And it falls under that. Sometimes things aren't going to go as planned, but you have to figure out a way around them anyway. Um, the third thing I'd have to say, this is something that I've leaned into before, but this time I've leaned into hard. And that is unapologetically making my own needs important. Um, and when I say unapologetically, I mean unapologetically. I don't mean selfish necessarily. Um, I do think that there is a line, but some of my actions might be seen as selfish because I have to put me first. And in some cases where people experience depression, like unapologetically making yourself important is the difference between something really bad happening and you making it through that episode. And so it's something that I feel like we need to give each other more grace in as well. That when we see that somebody is struggling, that we're not assuming that we know what's going to help them or we know what's wrong or that we just need to push them through. Like that's not our place to do that. And so um but also unapologetically making your own needs important means that you need to understand your own needs and you need to know yourself well enough to know what you need to do. And so there were things like understanding that I cannot be responsible for other people's mental health. And what I mean by that is not that I'm not responsible for hurting other people, because obviously that would make me responsible, but that I cannot be other people's um, like friend therapist in times where my capacity is met. And I think because I talk about this stuff often, that happens to me often. I have people who reach out to me, which normally I love, and it makes me feel good that people trust me like that. But when I get into a place where my own mental health is impacted, I cannot be responsible for other people's mental health. And that, like JC said, we have to advocate for ourselves. Absolutely. Like we have to be able to do that. And part of being an advocate is understanding yourself, right? So part of that also was reducing social media and unapologetically muting people, blocking people, getting off social media, doing what I want, um, posting a million memes because they made me laugh. And it would make me feel good if they've just made one other person laugh. And so if you said you liked cats better than dogs one day and it bugged me, I might have muted you for 30 days. And I needed to unapologetically do that and not feel bad about it, not feel guilty because I wouldn't be there for somebody or I wouldn't be sharing their stuff or I wouldn't be participating. I needed to make myself important, and that was all part of that. Um, I also needed to stick to my inner circle. I have about 5 people who are my inner circle. Um, I know that these people will listen to me no matter what. They will play my 20-minute voxes. That would be a 15-minute vox plus some. I mean, that's a lot of voice messaging and listening to my Mandy podcast. Um, and I use those people. I don't use those people. Those people are my people to go to when I really have an issue. And it's not, I know that I have a wider circle that I could go to. I know that I have people that would drop everything if I reached out and I said, hey, I need you. I am positive I have a wider circle than that. Why I keep a smaller circle for things like this isn't because I'm embarrassed. It's because I need to know how that other person is going to react to me when I say certain things. And that, um, what's what I'm looking for? That reliability or that knowing makes me feel safe and it makes me feel comfortable. And so I want to know that they are going to laugh when I say something funny. I want to know that when I cry, that they're going to be like, "Oh, Mandy, I'm so sorry." Um, I know that they're not going to give me toxic positivity. I know that they're not even going to give me positivity when I don't want it, because sometimes you just don't want it. I know that they are the 5 people that will 100% of the time say the right things. And you need those people. You absolutely need those people. If you have not identified those people, I promise you have them. One of the things that I hear people say, or they'll post a lot, is, um, oh, nobody loves me, everybody hates me because nobody reaches out to me and says hello or asks how you're doing. I'm sorry, but that's BS. Reach out to somebody then. I have been suicidal about 5 times in my life. There has never once been another person who has saved me from killing myself. The only person who's ever saved me is me. And that is because I've had the people, I've had the strategies, and I know what to do. I don't ever want somebody to take that away from me. I want to know that I can rely on myself to get myself through those times. Part of that is knowing who my inner circle is and empowering myself to reach out to them, and not waiting for someone to reach out to me. And if they don't, saying, oh my gosh, nobody likes me, everybody hates me. No, I need to empower myself to do that. Is it nice when people reach out to you and ask you how you are? Absolutely. Should friends do that for each other? Yes, if they think about it, they absolutely should. But that falls back under not being responsible for other people's mental health. I'm responsible for my mental health. If I'm not feeling good, I need that core group of people to be able to reach out to and to talk to. And that's empowering to know that kind of thing. And it's really, really important. Um, and Yeah, and Stephanie says sometimes I need commiseration, and yeah, and it depends upon. For me, it depends upon my capacity if I can use commiseration or not. Like at some levels, I need somebody to say, oh my gosh, yeah, this, that stinks. I have this going on too, and we can kind of cry or laugh about it or get angry about it together. And sometimes, like you just need that person to listen, and sometimes you just want to shut up and you just want somebody else to talk. And so, like, knowing those things is imperative. Um, so finally, I think the last category would fall under that process and protect. And I've said this a little bit and alluded to it. But again, my own needs, I need to make my own needs important. And so one of my rules, I guess, is what I say goes. And I don't mean that in the I'm an adult, so I can do whatever it is that I want, and everybody else needs to deal with it. Because I always feel like that's kind of a immature stance to look at your emotions, because then you're not taking other people's mental health like into account as you're doing things. However, when I say that my capacity is filled, or I say that I don't have room in my schedule, or I say that I'm going to take some time at noon to do a somatic exercise, what I say goes. And that also goes for myself. So, like, if I say I'm doing it, I need to make sure that I do it. And so that's I don't know if it's a boundary thing. I think it might be also a control thing. Like, what can I control? I can control that I follow up on what I say. And if I say something, I need to stick to that. And that's boundaries as well. I do have strict boundaries on my time and energy. Again, staying off social media, or if I want to spend half an hour looking at funny memes or reels, I'm going to do that. And I'm probably going to send them to Sarah Thomas, because she is my meme buddy. And so, like any of the rest of you who get memes from me, you only get about 10% of what I send Sarah. So she gets all of the memes. And so, you know, my time and energy it needs to go with what makes me feel better. It cannot go into places that make me feel bad, because as depression goes, if I go down into that space, I'm going to stay there, and I'm going to have to dig myself out, which is so much harder than just staying out to begin with. So having strict boundaries on my time and energy, and knowing what those boundaries are and being able to communicate them is important as well. Along with that, reducing the need to explain myself or my circumstances. I ran into an issue with work where I had taken off for a medical procedure, and I had put in my emails, I will not be answering email or text, and I still had a company text me and tell me to respond to an email while I was out. Unfortunately, my response to them indicated that I had had a medical procedure and I would not be responding. However, I shouldn't have even had to go that far. I should have just ignored the text. I should have left it alone. And, as people who are dealing with our mental health issues and, understanding other people, like if people say they're on vacation, they're on vacation. We don't need to reach out to them. We don't need to ask. We don't need to find out. We don't need to tell them to work. Like understanding that those, that goes along with having those boundaries, right? So it kind of goes both ways, but for me, it really, like, I should have had the boundary to not respond. I couldn't help it because I was honestly so mad. Again, sometimes my emotions are all over the place, and you get that text and it's like explosion, right? And so I did respond, but we shouldn't have to. So like understanding that I don't need to explain myself to anybody when it comes to stuff like that. When somebody's crossing a boundary, I don't need to over explain, is important, and it's a learning curve for me as well. Okay. Finally, recognizing and respecting my capacity for others. And this is another one of those making myself important. I need to be able to recognize when I'm at capacity. That happens very quickly when my depression is bad. That means that my capacity might be talking to one person a day. And I need to give myself the grace for that and make that okay, so that I don't feel like I need to reduce my capacity to deal with my emotions so that I can deal with other things. And so all of these things are about, again, me knowing what I need, making myself important, understanding how to set boundaries, to hold boundaries, to, not put myself in a position where I'm all of a sudden feeling lost because I've used my capacity. I don't know how to help somebody. I don't know how to help myself. And all of a sudden the world's moving too fast around me and I can't deal with it. And so it's about keeping me in those minute to minute cycles, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 1 hour, whatever it is. And getting me through that time so that I can feel like I'm on the upswing. And lastly, here's the thing that so many people miss about mental health issues. They forget to process emotions. And that's why I said, one of the things that I've always liked about myself is my ability to take something very abstract and to make it concrete. And so when people do that, though, they tend to push off the stuff that feels. Because a lot of times people will move into that concrete and they'll say, well, if I just use a strategy and I'll take it minute by minute, I'm going to do it minute by minute until I make it to 5 minutes, and then make it 10 minutes. And by 1 hour, I'm going to be happy. And at 1 hour, I'm going to feel joy. I'm going to do something happy that makes me happy. And I'm never, ever going to process that, negative emotion that I felt like I was having. Processing your emotions is just as important as using strategies to help you get through those times. And so what processing emotions can look like is it can look like digging for the trigger. Why do I feel this right now? Does it feel reasonable? And sometimes sometimes we're not in a place to even make the determination if it's reasonable. And sometimes it's not, and that's okay too. Um, Sometimes the emotion is anger, and sometimes it's anger at something that's not even what we're supposed to be angry at. Um, for this particular depressive bout, crying was a big thing for me. I'm not a big crier, but crying was a big thing. And I had about week and a half, 2 weeks of some massive, ugly crying at any time of day for absolutely what felt like no reason. One time I was in the grocery store and I was looking at ice cream and I had to hold back an ugly cry, like the sniffles, the sobs, the like that type of thing, the whole 9 yards until I got out to the car. And it didn't really seem to be any reason for it. All crying, frustration, anger, all of those things, it is a buildup of your emotions that needs to be released. It's not bad. We look at it as negative. It's not negative. It's only not good if you continue to do it over time and nothing ever gets better. Then it's something that obviously, in feeling any of these things, you should see a therapist for. But crying itself is not bad. It's a release of emotions. It's why when you have a really big, ugly cry where you're sobbing and you're maybe, throwing things or your head's in your pillow or whatever it is, it's afterward you feel exhausted, but you feel better because you've released that emotion. And so sometimes it was um sometimes it was crying and being okay that it felt like it was for no reason, that it was just an emotional release that had built up and I needed to get it out. And that's okay. Sometimes, like Stephanie says, sometimes triggers come from strange places. Like absolutely, like who knows what the ice cream incident was about? That could have. I mean, like I don't know, but it could have been something triggering for me that I just wasn't thinking about. Um, but understanding that those things are okay in that moment and working through those instead of shoving them down and pushing them down, or convincing yourself that it's something else. Working through those is the best way to try to get through to the other side. And I think that sometimes we think, oh, well, if we just shove it down and we don't feel it, we're going to get through this faster. But actually, I find that leaning into some of those emotions is one of the best ways to move through some of those things faster. I used to have a friend that told me that as soon as he had a day of ugly crying, he knew that he was on the upswing of the depression. And so working through those is so important. Um, Finally, like if when we're in some of these times that we feel emotions really, really strong or really heavy, remember to really lean into the things that make you feel good. And again, lean into them hard. When something makes you happy, just take a second to like really feel that and to kind of revel in it and hold on to that feeling, because the more you recognize it, the faster you recognize it, the more you're going to feel it and the quicker you're going to feel it. And like if you're feeling the sad strong, you're going to feel the happy strong too. And so that's what's going to kind of pull you out of this. And so um yeah, a good sappy movie is always an excuse to cry. Like if you need that catalyst, there's so many good movies out there. I always cry at the end of Beauty and the Beast for some reason. Like if you want to make me cry, the end of Beauty and the Beast will do it every single time. I don't even know why. It's not even like it's a favorite movie, but that will, anything like that. And so those are some suggestions, and of course, not everybody is. Some people are just going to be feeling a holiday funk, not a full-on depression. But some of these strategies will work for that to make sure that you really lean into some of that and get to know yourself well enough as a human. You don't need to be known as mom or dad or daughter or sister. You can just be like you as a human on your own. And getting to know that person is one of the best things that you can ever do for your mental health, because you are unique in every way that you're going to react to things, and your experiences make you who you are, and your personality makes you who you are. And all of that comes together to be like to create your healing path for where you're going to go and how you're going to move forward. So I hope that everybody, I hope that you got something out of this, just one little tidbit, at least, maybe understanding the perspective of depression a little bit better. And everybody have an amazing holiday, or at least a break coming up here, and have a great night. Thank you.